Hey, what's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with metaltrenches.com, and today we're talking about Finnish melodic death metal band Mors Principium Est and their 7th album, 7, via AFM Records. And hey, if you'd like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Now, I've been listening to this band since I discovered 2014's Dawn of the Fifth Era, and after going back at that time to listen to their impressive previous catalog going all the way back to 2003, I am prepared to call them the most underrated band in melodic death metal. And their often untapped worth continues to be on display with 7. While other legends in the genre like In Flames nosedive into mediocre material,
endless trash!
And others like At the Gates and Soilwork tend to be hit and miss, Mors Principium Est have been incredibly consistent in delivering satisfying, riff-driven music that is fast-paced and just plain fun. Take, for example, the oddly timed transitional riff and killer tapping verses on Lost in a Starless Aeon. Total banger of a track, and easily one of my favorites with its catchy chorus, epic bridge, and massive, almost 30-second solo. Honestly, I could probably do an entire video just on this one. One of the things that sets this band apart from other melodic death metal bands is their very bombastic approach to symphonic elements. They already trend toward the more energetic, thrash-influenced side of the spectrum of bands like Arch Enemy with their high-octane guitars, but the additional synth and strings take them to almost Flesh God Apocalypse levels of grandeur on other personal favorites like March to War. That's not even to mention the very atmospheric string intro and yet another ripping harmonized solo on that one. And the union of these elements with the more neoclassical approach of the guitars on certain portions of Master of the Dead is nothing short of magical. Another track I could probably spend hours analyzing, so it pains me to only share these few seconds. Just know that even Mozart and Wagner would headbang to this. Speaking of which, sometimes it's difficult to truly capture what's so great about bands like this without just repeating myself over and over again. After all, the techniques they're using aren't anything new, going back to the original Gothenburg explosion, and each song more or less adheres to these old tricks. But, even so, I implore you to give 7 a full listen to truly understand to what degree Mors Principium Est absolutely nail every single aspect of the blueprint and ramp it up to 11 track after track. In this way, they really do manage to rival the classics. Honestly, I didn't think that the band would ever match the sheer in-your-face intensity of these fusions on 2007's Liberation Equals Termination, especially after the last 2 albums felt a little bit more scaled back both in scope and energy. But 7 in many ways feels like a serious second wind, or a rebirth to name that last track, from a band willing to work twice as hard to prove themselves even over a decade later. If I do have a small area of growth for this band to consider moving forwards, it's the vocals. While I do like that they have a little bit of a lower, deeper register this time when compared to the somewhat squelchier sound of previous albums, I do tend to appreciate a bit more range to better complement the overall sense of scope. They're perfectly serviceable for the genre, but if I'm giving input, that's really the only thing I have to say. In the end, as much as I also enjoy moodier bands like Insomnium and later career Dark Tranquillity, I still have a special affection for melodic death metal bands, especially later in their career, that still bring it hard like back in the early 2000s. I give 7 a 10 for enjoyability. Again, start to finish a highly focused and consistent work perfectly crafted for endless headbanging and crowds full of raised horns. Even with the band's own discography, this feels like one of their best efforts. I give it a 10 for musicianship. As far as the genre goes, it doesn't get much better than this, from the songwriting to the performances. The impressive guitars and symphonic elements alone will leave you breathless over and over again. As for innovation, it's just a 7. Nothing new to hear on this one, and it's a good example of why I utilize all 3 of these scales when I rate albums. It helps me better ground myself in objectivity when comparing to other more trend-setting albums each year, while also providing full credit to where it's due. But I know people still want that final rating, and when you average them all together, it's still a very solid A- for Mors Principium Est, 7. Please share this review and shout their name from the rooftops to give them the recognition that they so desperately deserve. Y'all, thanks as always for watching, and let me know down in the comments what you thought of this album. What's your favorite Mors Principium Est album? And maybe also, what's your favorite melodic death metal album of all time? And depending on when you're watching this, I'm also releasing a Mors Principium Est tier list video to rank and discuss all of the albums. So watch that, and also stick around for more reviews, roundups, interviews on the podcast. You name it, we've got it. So plenty more reasons to subscribe. Again, if you haven't already, I also have a tier list of melodic death metal bands, so you can see where I rank them within the pantheon of all these other groups. And of course, in the description, you can find links to our social media, the email newsletter, our Patreon, and Subscribe Star if you want to take that extra jump to becoming a full-on supporter. Just $1 a month even gets you early access to content and helps me keep this train a-rolling. And then, of course, there's also metaltrenches.com for even more reviews and content. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.